Filmatics, welcome to the show. Today we have an amazing guest for you. We have director Greg Zekowski. He's the director of season 4, Ryan's Mystery Playdate, co-producer of the Emmy-nominated Walking Dead Red Machete. Let's welcome Greg to the show. Hi, Greg. Welcome.
Hi. How you doing?
So happy to have you on the show.
Happy Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon or whatever the day is.
Yes.
We shot late last night. So.
We've been baking in LA in April at like 95 and 98 degrees.
I know, it's horrible. It's horrible. Yeah, we were shooting yesterday. Call time was 11. It was 97. We're in a parking lot. It was perfect.
Were you able to make some steaks on that
what
asphalt?
else do you want? Yeah. No, it's all good. It's all good. And yeah. Water, umbrellas, and take your time.
Right. And Greg, where are you recording with me live today?
I'm in Burbank, California, the exciting town of Burbank, right near the Warner Brothers backlot, not far from Porto's. There you go.
Oh, Porto's is great. They have delicious pastries.
Oh yeah. Their little guava pastries. Now I gotta taste for it. I gotta go. I'm in Burbank. I've been here since in Burbank since 95. I was in Los Feliz before that. And I came out here in 1989 from Texas.
From Texas?
Yeah.
A Texas boy. What part of Texas did you grow up in?
I grew up, I went to college in Denton, just north of Dallas, and then worked in the business in Dallas for a little bit. Went to high school in Houston, where obviously my family was there. So I went to the Performing Arts High School there. It's the 50th anniversary of HSPBA, my high school alma mater. So shout out to them.
Congratulations, yeah.
Good for them. It was like going to a Fame high school, only in Houston, and everybody talked with a Southern accent. So otherwise, it was like the old TV show Fame. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, wow. Like the Fame. I want to ask you, so you went, your high school is like Fame. You went to an art school. How did you first start getting into, films? Like, what was your favorite film growing up?
Oh, my favorite film growing up. From the earliest film, there was a movie, and I've probably now seen it more times than anybody cares to talk about it. It was a movie by Stanley Kramer called It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And it was a comedy that had every major actor on the planet in it, at least that was associated with that studio or friends of Stanley Kramer. And it was just hilarious. And I would sneak into the theaters because back then you could, I remember back in the old days, but back then it was cheap and kids were allowed to be free range babies. And so I would sneak into the movie theater and I would sneak off to the movie theater, and it was like a quarter, 50 cents. And I would stay and see it 2-3 times. And even today I'll sit and watch the film because there's just so much comic brilliance in it. But that was sort of an early film in my background that got me into the idea of movies and funny. And then all the Marx Brothers films. And then as I got older and I started to appreciate and read more, I started getting into more intense movies. Everything from Apocalypse Now to Lawrence of Arabia, The Godfather. But movies like that, I remember going and seeing The Sting and just thinking, what a perfect film, and I watched it about a month ago with my youngest son, and it's fascinating because the pacing then was different. The lighting was a little brighter because of the type of film it was, but the film still holds up, at least in my book. It's just great films will stand the test of time as long as they can get out of period stylings. Some movies are limited to the time frame that they were made. Like you go back and rewatch The Trial of Billy Jack, and it's such a goofy movie, and it was shot so appropriate for when it was made. But now you're watching and you're going, oh my God, don't do it. Oh, they're doing it, But it's still fun, as long as you approach it correctly.
Yeah, like some of the 70s films, they were so like stylized, right? You watch them.
Snap and then zoom across the street because now we had zoom lenses that could work, and everybody was shooting on portable cameras, and so it was different. Like which compared to now, like we're shooting with some of the new cameras, like the Komodo or the new Sony or the Red, and you literally can walk in a set and you're like, is it lit? It looks dark like a closet, and you go to the monitors. Oh my God, it's bright. Everybody looks amazing. And such subtle, minimal lighting, completely different. And you know, you can shoot 6 or 8K. You don't even need a zoom lens. You can zoom later in post, reframe, change it. A whole different level of flexibility. And I'm sure people will look back, and I'm wondering when they're going to look back and go, look what those goofy guys are doing back in 2022, how they were making films with those silly cameras, you know. So who knows?
Yeah. I want to talk about, so I have to ask you, as a little boy, you liked It's a Mad Mad World. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
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 I remember watching that with my mom. She's Italian, and we laughed our heads off in that movie. That's one of my favorites. It was hilarious. Like the good old screwball films, they just don't make them like they used to, do they? Have there been any movies like that recently?
Well, it's really hard to make especially with a cast that big. They tried to remake it. It's like remaking Cannonball Run. The problem that you run into was all of the talent that was in that, Sid Caesar, you know, all the way across the board in that film. These were people that were masters of slapstick humor, put up with strong dramatic actors like Spencer Tracy, who, if you think about Spencer Tracy, nobody goes, Spencer Tracy, that comic actor. Then you go back and you watch that film and you realize he nails it. You can't imagine anybody else as the detective in that, you know. But the number of people in it that just did little bits. Jerry Lewis has a small part in it, you know, running over his hat in a car. I mean, my God, Jerry Lewis at that time was maybe, you know, he was like one of our biggest megastars, and he had a walk-on part. So the odds of a film like that getting remade are very, very small, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. Who knows? You think about like you know, Soderbergh, who can pull off Ocean's 11 and the remake that was made so well. Some of the subsequent ones you might argue one way or the other, but they were able to make a movie that stood up against the original Ocean's 11, which is a thing, you know. So I think it's a talent thing. Back then, you had actors that were perfect for that film. How many actors today can end up and do that type of comedy and be believable? Not as many. You know, it would be a difficult film, and you need the right director and the right studio behind it, or it would just become a self-indulgent piece of garbage. But you know, I'm available. They could call me anytime.
Yeah. And speaking of, so you're a director, so you're watching, you're sneaking off to go watch a film. I think everyone at that age, we were allowed to go and watch films. And then
Oh yeah.
you also mentioned you're watching The Sting with your son. I want to ask, is there any Criterion films that you fell in love with as a director that said, hey, that's what I want to do?
Well, I mean, back then there wasn't Criterion films. There were just old movies in black and white on TV on the UHF channels. For those of you that are watching, there used to be only 3 major channels on the TV, and then there was a secondary dial that had on fuzzy channels with static that were your local broadcasts, and those were the UHF channels. Ultra free matter. And yeah, so you grew up, I don't know if you remember, on Sunday nights in the spring, you'd get the 10 Commandments and you'd get the Wizard of Oz that would come out. They'd then show later on Gone with the Wind. So those are your like hero movies, like, you know, just like in the fall, you get all the Charlie Brown specials around Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then those expanded a little bit.
And
you
The
know,
Sound of Music.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, there were movies back then that were, you know, at least to me, that sort of probably shaped me if I look back, like movies, all the Bob Hope films, the road movies, Casablanca, anything with Bogart, you know, shaped my understanding of drama. Watching art, the black and white detective hard-boiled, you know, pieces. I think as I got older, the comedies I was drawn to were what are now called classics. You know, Caddyshack, Animal House. Meatballs, which is a forgotten comedy with Bill Murray. What was the one with Val Kilmer that I totally enjoyed? House fills up with popcorn at the end. I forget the name of it. The Real Genius. You know, if you really go back and watch the highly crafted comedies, those stand up because it's not about the styling of the camera. It's about the joke. And in a lot of those, the cameras get out of the way. one of the challenges with comedy is getting the technology of the film out of the way, because it's about the joke. And if you look at the really good comedies in general, they don't. I think it goes back, if you look at the Marx Brothers, for example, they would take a film they were going to make and they take the material and go on the road. They do it in front of live audiences and figure out their timing. And they drew on their burlesque background, their live performance backgrounds, and bring that sensibility to know, okay, this is where the joke lays. Because remember, at that point, there wasn't live television. So the idea of the I Love Lucy model, which we all grew up watching I Love Lucy and all those syndicated shows, was funny, joke, laugh track. But that came out of funny, joke, audience laughing. If the audience didn't laugh, they'd reshoot it. Be a writer off to the side. That model hasn't changed. So understanding a live audience and understanding how jokes lay is hugely important. I think that's why there's been such a heavy leaning on stand-up comedians going into sitcoms, because they know how to sort of deadpan deliver, joke, funny, and you just instantly you're with them. And I think that's one thing that you get in Mad Men World or with the Marx Brothers is they know you're with them. They're bringing you on their journey. You know, a great movie brings you on their journey. If you go back and you watch dramatic films like the original Blade Runner, you're with Harrison Ford on that journey. You know, you're with Luke Skywalker as he's going on. You want to be that kid. You know, you left that movie back then. That was probably the first really great space movie that had the visuals to match the story since Forbidden Planet. You know, and from Forbidden Planet, you eventually ended up with the original Star Trek series. But that real gap of, I mean, that was 15 years or whatever it was. So Star Wars comes out, and these movies are coming out at that time that were changing our lives. Indiana Jones coming out, Jaws, which would scare the living daylights out of people. When I went to see that movie, I was a teenager. I was a very young teenager. But I was still a teenager, and I'd read the book. I think I read it when I was 12. So I'm sitting in the theater with my mom. She didn't know what it was. And everybody around me began to realize I knew where all the horror bits were coming from the book. And so I was watching the movie, and I would tell her, oh, here it's coming. And then they'd all react. And you see everybody around me. And I became like the narrator of when the next scare was. So when they did the scene in the boat where the head rolls out of the side of the boat, that was an addition. I don't think that was in the original book. At least I hadn't remembered it that way. So I didn't say anything. They all turned and got mad at me. It's like I've been pranking them. I was like, they made something up. You know, movies aren't exactly always literal to books. It's very rare, or even history for that matter.
You were directing already. You're already directing.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I lived in Florida, so that movie scared everyone in Florida by the beach. I remember I was scared of anything that, like, if a crab touched my toe, you're like, ah, and everyone would run out of the ocean.
Well, do you remember back then they had, at least I was in Houston at that point, and so Galveston was our beach. 30 minutes you're at the beach. And so Galveston, like the west side of Florida, it's got like beach, little water, then a little sandbar, then a little beach, and it's just very, very low angle pitch into the ocean. And in between there, what we all learned after that movie, and because they had a helicopter flying, look at the people, nobody's going in the water, and the helicopter's looking down at the water, and you could see all the hammerheads swimming. Oh. and you just said, no, I'm good. I'm not going to go in. You know, people still went to the beach, but you know where I had been, I knew where I had been the previous weekend. I'm good. And they weren't small; they weren't like this big. They were like 7, 8, 10 footers. Looking for lunch, and you know, your hand in the water looks like lunch. So anyway.
Yeah. So you're in Texas, and then you go to college. Can you tell us a little bit how you said you knew you wanted to go to an art college, right?
So I was at a performing arts school, but I was as a musician. I was a trumpet player. And I thought I wanted to be. It wasn't I thought I wanted to. When you're doing something at that moment, that's what you want to do. You didn't think you want to do. I'm going to go do that. I want to be a football player, soccer player, artist. I was going to be a musician. I went to the University of North Texas, which is now North Texas. Or it was North Texas State back then. They switched it around, changed the name so they could charge more money. But back then it was maybe the biggest music school in the world.
Wow.
I remember walking in and auditioning as a trumpet player, and I looked at the guy doing the auditions, and I think it was number 7. I'd signed up early. And he said, "Yeah." I said, "So how do I do?" He goes, "Well, I only have 238 more people to see," and that meant there were just auditioning for the jazz bands. There was 240 trumpet players, not including the classical players and people that weren't auditioning.
Oh my gosh.
There was 110 drummers, regular drummers in the drum. I mean, it was just a huge school. So there was bands and music everywhere. As a consequence, because I was there studying music, what I learned is they were always filming something there. Somebody was coming in, and I sort of helped liaise on that. And then I had friends in the radio TV department, and they were always doing projects, and I just loved that world. I also knew that when you went on and you put on a band on stage, nobody wanted to run it. So I ended up becoming a stage manager. And that was my first real motion into performing and running sets and things like that, and being in charge. And so it was a natural transition. As I finished college, I ended up in Dallas, and I'd already been doing some acting at that point. And so I started doing some acting. I did some stunt work on a Hal Needham film. Actually, it was Joe Margolis was directing, but Hal was doing second unit. And I had been studying martial arts, so I did some stunt work, and then I did some standing in. I stood in for Alec Baldwin and Eric Bogosian in a movie called Talk Radio, directed by Oliver Stone. And that was a really hugely educational process, because if you ever want to learn about how a film is made and you can become a stand-in on a good movie, you're literally there to be the flesh model, the flesh mannequin for the scene, but you get to listen and hear how everything works. You're at the center of the vortex and you don't exist. So I got to see how Oliver Stone works, Joe Reedy first ADs. Sorry, that's my son way deep in the background screaming.
We have lots of fun stuff like that. Grandfather clocks and
Richardson actually almost caught me on fire. He wanted to do a scene where I was about this close to a TV, and he wanted the reflection of the actor in the TV. Well, in order to get the exposure, because it was on film, it was in the 80s, he had to put a 4K light about this far away from me. And as I'm sitting there, like, going, "Guys, this is really hot. My skin feels really crispy." And I look over, and my AD pulls me out. My jacket is actually smoking. It was actually catching on fire.
oh my gosh,
And
you're like,
so
my
that
skin feels crispy,
Oh,
my
yeah, it was
jacket's
stupid.
on fire. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And I was like, I don't think Alec's going to want to do that. But it was interesting because Alec had just done a couple of films. He'd just done Beetlejuice and was about to do Married to the Mob, or just was right around that time. And you just knew that he was a movie star. You just knew at that level he was one of those guys. He just had that presence, the quality about him. Very young at that point. Anyway, and it was in that transition out of college into Dallas, because I produced plays and TV and did commercials and was just doing everything. It was, for me, I learned that in college, at my school at that time, if you were a senior in school, you could go down to the art, radio, television, film vault and check out any equipment you wanted to. All my friends that were film majors were still juniors, because I was ahead in my schedule, couldn't rent equipment. So I would go rent the equipment and say, "Guys, we're going to go shoot something. What do you want to do?" Because they were the ones that did it. They go, "How'd you get it?" I go, "Don't worry about it." So I did news stories for the local TV station, stuff like that. Ended up in Dallas, working as a cameraman at Adam Rourke's Film Actors Lab. And Adam Rourke was an actor from LA who sort of semi-retired back to Dallas to teach actors about how to act on film. The technique of whatever you do, how to do it on film. So, like, for example, we're in this frame, but if I wanted to stand up really quick and I stood up too fast, there's no way a cameraman's going to catch you. So you have to learn how to stand up slowly, sit down slowly, how to eat, smoke, walk, do whatever it was that you needed to do on camera, memorization techniques, knowing where your better light is, how to dress. All of his 30 or 40 years of experience, he was bringing there. It wasn't about memorize a scene from this acting book and now you can do something by Richard Dreyfuss did a year ago in the theaters. But when you walked on a set, you knew how to read a call sheet. You knew what your marks were.
Oh, wow.
You had respect for the process. So that's what the school started as. And at some point or another, I realized that there wasn't much of a film industry there. It had faded away. The TV show Dallas had been canceled. There wasn't a lot of work. So my roommate moved out. I moved out. And I came out October 27th, 1 in the morning, and arrived in Venice, California. I had a 69 Mustang, and everything I owned was in it. I parked it on Venice Boulevard, and I went up to this place that he was sub-renting, and I slept, and I got up the next morning, and everything was still there. And then I discovered that neighborhood was notorious, and I was very lucky. Because my car kind of looked like I was quasi-homeless, nobody messed with it because it was just jammed full of things. But, now I would never park a car with anything in it in that neighborhood.
Oh yeah, it would be broken into in a heartbeat. Oh my god.
In fact, my car got broken into about a month later. I had a job in Hollywood. It was a month and a half later. It was Christmas. I was going to a Christmas party. You know how they do that thing where you have like a gag gift? So in the back seat of my car, I had a wrapped up gift of like men's boxers, but with money on it, and some other goofy things, like some gummy bear, whatever it was. And so I was going to take the party. When I got back to my car, someone had broken the window and taken it. What they'd forgotten is I had the door open. So they didn't even open the door. So now not only did they steal the present, they cost me a new window.
Oh.
So it was just silliness.
Oh.
But anyway, I ended up out here, and I started off selling radio, television, and film products, old Grass Valley switchers and Sony cameras. Realized I hated that, and then I found my way in through into a group called the Los Angeles Theater Sports, which is run by Dan O'Connor, and they're still going strong. Great talent there. They're actually doing this weekend, maybe they're doing an unscripted version of Jane Austen plays. They do Shakespeare. That was sort of my training in how to be on stage and listen and think and see how actors integrate with each other and what spontaneity does, and just creating an environment of yes, which is hugely important in front of the camera or on the stage. I produced some theater for a little while, and ended up being a PA, and then from a PA I decided to become an assistant director, and then I just kept going, and all along the way shooting short films and getting into film festivals and stuff like that. So that's my origin story.
Oh, that's amazing. And we're gonna end it part one here, and we're gonna come back because I want to really talk about your journey and all your wonderful projects that you are working on and have worked on, because they're so fantastic. And we have lots more. So everyone come back to part two with Greg Zekowski, and come on back for part two, because he's going to talk about some directing, moving shots, and on Ryan's Mystery Play Date, The Walking Dead. Oh my gosh, we got Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon, Kirby Buckets, Mighty Med, Salem Rogers, Partners, Ant Farm, The Wizard Returns, Alex versus Alex, Medicine High, Zombie, and Cheerleaders. Big Time Rush, so many things you've worked on. And also we want to talk about your karate, because you do karate in your black belt.
Yep.
Okay, so I just want us to have enough time so the audience can hear all about your projects you worked on. So come on back, everyone. Thanks for listening, and come on back for part two with director Greg Zekowski.